Welcome to the Center for Languages and Intercultural Communication at Rice University. In this two-part workshop, Kate White will guide you through the journey of vocabulary learning. First, she will discuss what is vocabulary learning and what it means to know a word. In the second segment, she will share concrete application ideas for teaching vocabulary. As a foreign language teacher or learner, think about why it is important to learn vocabulary. If you're a teacher, how do you teach vocabulary? Why do you teach vocabulary? If you're a learner, why are you studying vocabulary? What do you think is the best way for you to master vocabulary? If I'm studying a foreign language, should I start learning words first or grammar first?
So second language learning is a change in your internal mental state. It's not just adding on, you're changing what's already there. The real intrinsic difficulty in learning a foreign language lies in that of having to master its vocabulary. Everybody quotes this. Vocabulary may be the center of language acquisition, says Barcroft. Communicability and comprehension are likely to be compromised if the learner's vocabulary knowledge is deficient. If you don't have the right words, you can't get the message across. If you don't have the right grammar, you might still be able to get it across, right? Without grammar, very little can be conveyed. Without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. So this is why vocabulary is important.
For a long time, people used to think teaching vocabulary wasn't important, but now we know it is. But as I study foreign language, I have trouble memorizing words. How is my memory and language learning connected?
So what is memory? I like to think of memory like this. It's a big cloud of things that are all connected to each other, right? So if this is cat, let's say. It's connected to everything that you connect cat to. Maybe like other animals that you keep in your home. Being really annoying when you're trying to sleep, right? Cats. So how and where are words stored in your memory? Well, linguistic information is stored in your semantic memory, but separately from concepts. Because remember, concepts are not tagged for language. But everything you know about language is also stored somewhere. They're just not stored together. So you attach linguistic information to concepts when you bring them up. And all of your linguistic information is stored together for all languages. So this is your concept of a cat. You grew up, you figured out what cats were, you saw enough cats to figure out what a typical cat is, right? You have a concept of a cat in your head. Well, you also have every linguistic form of cat that you know stored separately, and whenever you need to produce or recognize the word cat, these two things are assigned to each other when you bring them out in production or in recognition or in language use in any way. So you might have more than one name for cat, is what I'm saying. And those are stored separately from the concept of cat. As Barcroft says, a person's vocabulary is everything you know about a language that you've acquired, and it exists as a vast network, like that network picture I showed you. Within the network, every lexical item is connected to other lexical items that it might be related to in meaning or in form. And so he says statistical properties that dictate how they should be used. So basically, there are some words that more often go with each other than other words. So those are the statistical properties talking about collocation. So you might be really used to hearing fire and truck together because of fire truck. So they're statistically likely to appear next to each other. And your brain knows that, for example. And meaning is the entire semantic network that a word or phrase activates when you process it in some way. For example, if I say red, what do you think of? Blood, fire truck, stop sign? Right. So in your brain, when you hear red, everything that you associate with the word red is also activated just in case that's what you're trying to get at, right? It's efficient, sort of a spreading activation. So here are all the ones I thought of. So color, fire truck, flower, stoplight, stop sign, hair. And then also associated phrases. Roses are red, violets are blue, right? Paint the town red. Any sort of information that goes with that is sort of minimally activated just in case that's where you're going because of statistical probabilities. So what is memory? Well, say this is red. Here's all the little things that might be connected to red. It also might be connected to other things, right? It's not alone. You're not only bringing out red, you're bringing out maybe a little bit of everything that could be attached to it. So how does this relate to vocabulary learning? Well, all of the processes for word learning and processing and all of these retrieval processes we're talking about are similar across both languages. But what's really important for second language learning is that you already know a language. You're not working from nothing, right? There's an entire system that already exists in your brain that is linguistic and sort of language specific. So linguistically, you're mapping a new system onto a pre-existing system and figuring out how they fit together. And also conceptually, you're applying new labels to concepts you already have. Sometimes the concepts are new, that happens sometimes, or sometimes you're splitting up the semantic space differently. Words might refer to different things that are very similar. And this is important because research has shown that learners are sensitive to semantic information even from the beginning. So they're not just doing this. They're activating meaning from the very beginning. So it's not just that they're learning form translation. They're doing it all in processing. So there's a lot going on in their brains. Let's discuss. Take a couple minutes. Do you remember any moments that you couldn't recall a word in one language but could easily recall it in another? Why do you think that happened, based on what we just talked about? And can you think of any instances when it seemed that students might be confusing words because they're closely related? Does anyone have really good examples? I'll give you mine first. So one time in Russia, I was telling a story in class, and I was like, Russian, 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 20, Russian, 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 Russian. I said 20 in Spanish, and my teacher looked at me and said, Kate, what? That word you just said in the middle there wasn't Russian, and I didn't even notice, right? I just used the word for 20 different language. For the second one, I remember distinctly for weeks not being able to remember which word was spoon, knife, or fork, right? Just mixing the three of them up completely all the time.
Now we know that memory is structured, and the structure affects learning. It affects where the words are and how you get them out. But then, how many words do we need to know to carry on a daily routine?
So what does it mean to know a word? Well, first, what is a word? Well, generally when we talk about words, we're talking about lemmas. Basically, it's the base form and meaning, and then you can inflect that or derive other forms from it, but there's a base form, and that's what your brain actually stores. We'll talk about why we know that in a second. So there's other forms that are likely connected to it, but the base form is usually what's stored. And the base form can change over time if a different one becomes more frequent. But the question is, how many of these words do you need to know to be proficient? And what does it mean to know a word? So we're going to talk about those two things. So how many words do you need to know? And this is the part where we've mostly based on what we know about English. That's a problem, but it's true. So you have to learn thousands of words, basically. And the reason why we talk about lemmas is because if we were talking about individual word forms, this would be more like 250,000, which that doesn't make any sense with the way our brains work. So it's lemmas. And so this is an educated native English speaker or someone who has a college education or some other kind of education beyond high school, because college freshmen usually have about 9,000 lemmas-ish for English only. So the way we count words is often based on the frequency counts in the L1. So this number could change slightly across languages. We don't totally know the answer to that question. But basically your vocabulary size, we know that it correlates with comprehension, writing skill, all the other skills with language. The more vocabulary you have, no matter what the language, the better you are at all these skills. So the first threshold, this is sort of when they can talk and have a basic conversation, right? The sort of lowest level beyond just very beginning learner. This is what the Common European Framework B2 level is, knowing about 3,000 word families, 4,000 to 5,000 lemmas. And advanced or fluent gets you to university freshman. So how do we make that happen? How do we get students to learn quantity and quality? Well, the amount of words you present in the input correlates with the amount of words they know, we found. So the more words they have the opportunity to learn, the more they do. Vocabulary over time, development over time is regularly distributed, so they sort of advance at a steady pace through their study. There are lots of things that look at maybe students can learn 5 words per hour, maybe they can learn 8, maybe they can only learn 1. All of those studies, it pretty much varies according to what the teacher's doing, individual differences, the location, is it study abroad, is it at home, that sort of thing. So the more opportunities you give them, the more it's likely to happen. And also frequent words are often learned more quickly because they're the words you use the most, so they're the ones those students are better with, because they hear them more often.
In this video, you learned the following: the importance of knowing vocabulary, that memory is structured and the structure affects learning, first language vocabulary and second language vocabulary learning are connected, how many words you need to know, and how we get students to learn quality and quantity. This is the end of the first segment. Please proceed to the second segment, Teaching Vocabulary.